Okay, in Councillor Drysdale's absence temporarily, and I may move back to my vice-convener role in a minute, I'd like to welcome you all along to this meeting of the Audit Committee. The first, you've seen the agenda. It's not a terribly lengthy agenda, but I actually think there are on it two quite important and substantive reports later on. But could I take, first of all, the minutes of the last meeting on Wednesday, 18th of September. Are there any factual inaccuracies?
Apologies and declarations.
Oh, yeah. First of all, yes, absolutely. Can I ask if there's any apologies and declarations of interest? Yes.
There's apologies from Councillors Coates and Williamson, and Councillor McCall substituting for Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? There being none, then we do now move to the minutes of the meeting on Wednesday, 18 September. First of all, are there any factual inaccuracies, items that need to be amended? There being none, then can I ask for matters arising? I have one, but it won't take too long. But can I ask, first of all, any matters arising? No one? Okay. I would like to ask on matters arising on page 7. The question I asked last time on the audit report on Horsecross, and I asked if it would be available to the Council prior to making a decision on the Cultural Trust Transformation Project. Now, I think that will be decided on the 22nd of April. Could I just ask what the position is with that report? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the report should be considered by this committee prior to that date at the meeting at the beginning of the month.
Right, I think that would be helpful evidence before we move to that decision on, I believe it is indeed the 22nd of April. The other point I would just raise is last time we had the quite a lengthy session on welfare reform, and it's referred to there and to emerging issues. I also stated that, and I did do a follow-up letter to the person responsible in Scotland, to Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Service, and this is about the issue of having appeal hearings being heard here in Perth, than Dundee, Stirling or Kirkcaldy. Now, that was sent in early October. I've not received a response to that. I'd like to take it up with, I think it would be with the Ministry of Justice, but I think with current events, I think we may now have to wait until post the 12th of December. And then to pursue that matter then. Okay, that is minutes. Anything further on the minutes? Yes. We now proceed to item 4 on the agenda, the internal audit follow-up. Can I ask Jackie just on that to make the salient points?
Thank you, Councillor. This is the standard follow-up report that you receive, which gives the outcomes from the audits that have been undertaken and where actions have had a due date of July and August in 2019. Now, there were 5 actions that were due to be completed within that 2-month period, of which there are 2 actions, I think, on the appendix, which are yet to be completed, but the other actions have been completed. On the appendix, the 2 items, the 3 items relate to the capital programme and the school estate, and also the management of contracts report. I'm happy to take any questions if you've got any around about those actions.
Are there any questions? Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I just have a couple of small questions. On item 1703, the capital programme, is there a scheduled date for the gateway review process to be undertaken?
Thank you, Councillor. It's understood that there is a draft in place at the moment that is being considered by the Strategic Investment and Improvement Board. We are looking for that to be rolled out in January 2020. I don't know if Fraser's got any more recent update than that.
Thank you. Just to confirm that the draft document was submitted to the Strategic Investment Improvement Board in October with a view to submitting to the Executive Officer team. The aim is to have this rolled out early into new calendar year. Sorry.
And if I may, I have a secondary question about item 1812, about the management of contracts. And it's really about the spending limits and officer changing responsibilities. I'm just wondering if there's any alignment between the HR system and the financial system that would allow automated updates when people change roles and responsibilities.
Who wishes to take that? Nope.
There isn't an alignment.
So it's all done manually. And sorry, is there a manual process then in the HR system, HR processes that would automatically advise finance that if someone moves roles or responsibilities or changes? So how does the financial system get updated when somebody moves roles and has changing responsibilities?
An officer that advises the HR that someone moves, and then we'll change the codes in the authorised secretary lists.
But it's not an automated process as part of the HR process.
No, it's
It's
not.
maybe something worth considering. It would be good practice to normally do something like that as part of the HR review, both including for leavers as well, and joiners, to make sure that finance was notified. So it's maybe something to take on board, Convener, if that's acceptable to your Vice Convener.
Are there any further questions? Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Mine's on 1811 on page 13. It's the school estate strategy, and it talks here about the fact that, I mean, obviously we had the paper before the committee earlier this year. It talks about the strategy as 2012-2017. We're obviously at the end of 2019. It's now, the actions for this are now being held up due to a national strategy, but obviously the national strategy was announced after the initial date for completion, so that essentially has changed why it's being held up, presumably then. So could you perhaps enlighten us a bit more?
Yes, that's correct. I'm sure that Greg can put a little bit more flesh on the bones of this one, but the service knew that this national strategy was coming. It came, we actually had sight of it formally in September, and there were a number of changes that were beneficial to be made to the draft strategy that we had, because we did have a draft strategy before then, to bring the two into alignment. I don't know if Greg, you would have anything else to add to that?
Yes, just to support anything that's been said to date, Councillor McDade, we've obviously been waiting on the national strategy. There was a delay to the national strategy. We expected that to be even towards the end of last year and certainly at the start of this year. We've been kind of ready to roll because obviously as part of updating that we want to engage with obviously head teachers and staff and pupils and unions as appropriate. So hence we want to wait on the new strategy, which is now out. So we're now going through the process to bring it back to lifelong learning early in the new year.
I must say that sounds to me entirely sensible and reasonable. Just to follow up on what Councillor McDade is saying, that revised school estate strategy, I would presume that would go to Lifelong Learning Committee in, I think it's 22nd of January or 15th of March.
We've got a mentor to go in the March committee.
That's fine. That's helpful to know. Because I did see the property subcommittee, there was kind of brief synopsis of where we were with all the schools, but this will be a much more extensive document, I would presume.
Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you. I'm now going to hand the chair back to Councillor Drysdale for section 5.
Thank you, Vice Convener. And first of all, apologies for my late arrival. I was unavoidably detained without my phone for a brief period, so apologies for that. So moving on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the internal audit update. And again, Jackie, if I can ask you just to speak to your report initially, please.
Thank you, Convener. The report is reasonably self-explanatory. Internal auditors continue to be approached by services for advice and guidance, and where any control issues arise as a result of this work, a report will be brought forward to committee. The National Fraud Initiative, which is facilitated by the internal audit team, is now very close to conclusion. There's just one area where there is still some outstanding matches to be completed, and they should be completed by the end of this month. I would hope to bring the outcomes forward to the next committee from the current exercise, which is just concluding. The appendix details the audit reports which have been considered prior to today and an anticipated date for when future reports will be considered at audit committee. I'm quite confident at the moment that the plan will be delivered in full, and that the timescales on in the final column of the appendix are achievable.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. A fairly straightforward report on this occasion, I think, but are there any questions? Councillor McDade.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think you've already outlined that it's all achievable and on track. It was just sort of a point about the fact that February's audit committee seems to be very heavy indeed, and perhaps in future we might be able to space them out a bit more. Obviously today's a bit lighter, but it does look like we're getting a lot of reports in February, which I'll look forward to, and I'm sure it'll be the longest committee on record, but it might be nice to space them out a wee bit.
Thank you. It's really been a matter of finalising reports, because there are a couple of reports which are now either finalised or almost finalised, which but just missed the deadline for the current committee.
Thank you.
Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, I think we've got potentially 8 reports for the February Audit Committee, and it's in early February. The one I wanted to ask about, because it's not yet commenced, is on, in fact, both on contracting and workforce planning, is what you see as the scope, the nature of those audits. I think in contracting, I remember we had a situation, because all contracts over 50,000 have to be notified on the public contracts website. But I think, is this going to look into all aspects of contracting procedures?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, it will be a similar audit to what has been done before, but looking at across the council, and looking at the way in which contracts are managed and indeed are awarded. So that actually now is in the process of commencement. Certainly, meetings have taken place with for that audit to finalise the scope. With regard to workforce planning, that has also recently commenced, and we're in the process of scoping out that piece of work as well. So that will be coming forward.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions at all? No. Can we agree to note the report? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this is now the pre-arranged bit where I'd like to pass over to my Vice Convener to chair item 6 on the agenda. Stuart.
Thank you, Eric. We've only 2 more substantive reports on the agenda today. but I actually think they're quite important. I think in particular, the first one, I think with Audit Committee, there are times we have functions that are more similar to a Finance Committee when we look at the annual report and accounts and the annual audit. There are times when Audit Committee can some degree overlap with Scrutiny Committee. But I think here, this report on the Live Active Leisure income collection and reimbursement at the 4 campus sites in Perth and Kinross is very much, it seems to me, about controls, about processes, about training, and I have to say it does strike me as being very much about the sloppy procedures and over a period of time. So I want to ask, first of all, Jackie to make some comments on the report, and then to ask those from ECS, from Education Children's Services, to make comments, and then I shall open it up for questions and then possibly for observations. Jackie.
Thank you, Councillor. As you can see, that there are 2 objectives that Internal Audit looked at as part of this audit, to ensure that income due to Live Active Leisure is accurately collected and recorded at the community campus sites, and also to ensure that income belonging to Live Active Leisure is reimbursed in a complete and timely manner. This was an approved audit as part of the audit plan that had been considered previously here, and this was very specifically about the 4 community campuses, which are Breadalbyn, Strathern, Lochleven and North Inch, where these particular sets of procedures should have been in place with regard to us collecting income on behalf of Live Active Leisure and then reimbursing that income back to them. The 2 other community campuses at Glenanne and Blairgowrie have separate arrangements and were excluded from this review so that we could actually concentrate on the specific areas. What I would say is that Education and Children's Services were aware of some of the issues that were involved, that have arisen as a result of our audit. And across the board, I would say that both within the community campuses, within Education and Children's Services, and within Live Active Leisure, they've been very supportive and engaging in addressing the issues that have come to light. There are a good number that have come to light. Another point that I would say is, although I'm saying here that I'm not able to give assurance, this is really around the controls that are in place to ensure that everything is identified, everything is collected and everything is handed over and on a timely basis. During the audit, my team didn't observe anything which would give us concern that anything untoward was happening. Nothing was observed that would lead to that direction. However, the controls are not in place for us to be able to provide the committee with the appropriate assurance. I don't know whether that's sufficient for you just now, but I'm happy to answer any questions as we go through.
Thank you, Jackie. Could I now ask from Education and Children's Services for some comments?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I mean, it's obviously a very damning report, saying it's a weak report. We have been looking at this area to make sure that we can make improvements. We're looking to see how some of the weaknesses occurred. That's been due to sort of changeover of staff at different times in the year leading up to this process. We've had set up a working group that's referred to in the first action point with ourselves, Corporate Finance, the Campus Business Manager at Strathern and Live Active Leisure, and that was a very positive meeting, and we're going to take a lot of the actions forward from there that are within the report. So in a way, this report has helped bring together and galvanise the team to look at these issues and take them forward at this stage. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. We don't have anyone here from Live Active Leisure, but what I'm now going to proceed to is questions from councillors. First hand I see raised is Councillor McDade. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I don't think I've ever seen a report before the Audit Committee with so many actions in my 2.5 years, so that's quite concerning, actually. My question is actually around, had internal audit been approached informally prior to going into the audit plan, because you said ECS was aware that there were issues around it. Obviously, there was a significant number of issues around it. Had you been approached for advice prior to actually going into the audit plan?
Yes, Councillor, I had by Fiona Robertson, who I'm not sure what her title was at that point when she raised the issue, some of these issues with me. But it was something that had been brought to me as being something that may be worth looking at. And then, obviously, that was correct.
I think that's good, because I think we've discussed previously at the committee that we want departments to actively approach internal audit for advice before things get to a level where they get internally audited and get a bad report, so that's positive. I'll leave it there for the moment and perhaps come back and comment.
Anyone else? Councillor Drysdale.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. Yeah, as Councillor McDade has alluded to, I think it's important to recognise that whilst the report is critical and assessed as weak in certain respects, it's testament to the work of internal audit and the targeting of the work in this area that has brought this to light. So it's actually a positive story for the audit function, albeit this is obviously an issue that is of concern. So I'd like to thank Jackie and her team for that. One question that I wanted to ask at this stage is in relation to some of the narrative in action point 4 on the debt recovery process, where it is set out that whilst we don't currently know, this may be updated now, I don't know, but we don't currently know that the what the uncollected debts are over a number of years, dating back to 2011. Obviously, some of these debts may have prescribed and not be collectible accordingly. Do we currently, or do we now have any estimate on the amount of uncollected debt that we're looking at here?
Thank you. No, one of the actions that we discussed at the working group with Lau was to understand the baseline of where we are with the long-term debt, understand the short-term debt, the stuff that's just being raised just now, and probably up to the 3 months. It was the really older debt, and there was issues about communication as well, about had a class actually taken place, and had that information been passed to the campus office staff from Lau to say we shouldn't have raised that invoice. So we're actually doing a benchmarking exercise just now with Lau to make sure that we understand all the debt. So we're in that process. That's part of one of the actions. So we're undertaking that just now with Lau.
Okay, so the answer is no, we don't have a figure just now, but we hope to have an estimated.
Yes, we don't have an exact figure of the really old debt, the debt that's going back over years at that time. But that's what we're asking Lau to provide us so we can compare it to ours.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Vice Convener. You mentioned in the report that the finance procedure manuals were sometimes not known where they were. Did you find them?
Yes, internal audit did find them, but they weren't known widely within the campuses, and that's the issue.
Thank you. This report fills me with some alarm, actually. I think there are a number of failures and weaknesses, including in terms of manual procedures and processes, almost a little bit like my earlier comment about, the leavers and joiners process when people move from one employment to another, when they move from one department to another. The process coming out of HR needs to be very robust This is probably more of a comment, I'm sorry. But I'm assuming, I'm sort of answering my own question, I'm assuming there's not any automated processes in place to ensure that people are fully appraised of not just this manual, but other appropriate procedural manuals for the department when somebody moves, even if they just change role within a campus. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yes, we do send out information every year to say where the financial policies and procedures are to all budget holders, so that they're aware that it's there, and within that it's their responsibility for them to then inform their staff that they line manage that these things are there. But it's one of the things that we're finding from this, that we've had quite a bit of turnover in some of the campuses in recent years, and that has obviously not gone as well as it should have done.
Councillor McCall, you? Councillor McDade.
It's just a quick question in terms of following on the Councillor Drysdale's point around the debt recovery process and mentioning it goes back to 2011. Why had this not come up through LAL's auditing process? I know it does say that LAL's and the council's paperwork didn't always follow, but presumably it should be a much more significant sum of money to them than it is to us in terms of audit function. So why was it not showing up to them?
It's not really something that I can easily answer. The reports and the work that we undertook was very much on Perth and Kinross Council and on our systems, on our access to their systems. Why things weren't necessarily being picked up by Live Active Leisure is certainly not something that I would have or could have looked at as part of this review.
So Drysdale.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yeah, I just wanted to ask another question just around when we consider that this problem may have begun to emerge. How, you know, are we looking at, obviously the arrangements have been in place for 10 years. The procedures manuals were there at the start, presumably, and were used in the initial period. I'm just trying to understand whether there's a belief that the removal of the campus supervisor role in 2017 is one of the catalysts for what's happened here, the reduction in supervision / management of the 4 sites. I don't know who's best to answer that.
Thanks.
From an internal audit point of view, there were some elements within the campus procedures that were required to be undertaken by the role of the campus supervisor, and across the board, those levels of control, those levels of oversight were not appropriately reassigned in all cases, in all establishments. Everywhere was different. But with regard to whether or not this was a significant issue from a withdrawal of the post, I really have to hand it over to Education and Children's Services for their opinion on that one.
Greg.
I suppose just to comment on that, Councillor Donaldson, would be that I think it's part of it, but I don't think it was fundamental. I think it's part of that procedures, they were out of date, but really within the roles within the campus, they should have been able to undertake the process and procedures. So I think it was part of it, but not fundamental.
So it's almost Eric.
Thank you. So would it therefore be say, as you say, it's maybe part of the problem? Is the other part, is another major part, the duplication of systems between LAL and the council, and the need to reconcile these things on a daily, weekly, monthly basis?
I think because it's quite a complex process and procedure, and the duplication certainly doesn't help in the manual work that's required by staff. So I think, yes, the campus supervisor coming away is obviously part of the issue, but I think the turnover in staff in recent years, whether it's been through the management of the campuses, through the business managers, or through staff internally, because the processes are so complex, then the training probably hasn't been adequate as part of the induction training. And again, it's probably just the number of symptoms together has probably brought us to this position with the audit, unfortunately.
Councillor McDade. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Convener. This was a question for the service, really, in terms of, obviously, a lot of these actions are February 2020, some of them a bit further down the line. Given quite how damning, as you, in your own words, the report is, I would hope and assume this is a very high priority for ECS, and that when it comes back in the internal audit update in February, that most of these actions that are dated February 2020 will have been achieved, if not by February 2020, before, hopefully.
Yes,
Jim.
definitely it's a number one priority at the moment. Yes.
Good, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I've now straightened my thoughts. I suppose my question really is about, is this just symptomatic of this particular area of the service, or is it a wider issue around organisational change and handover, given that the roles and responsibilities of the supervisory role wasn't handed over correctly? And also, a little bit again, as I mentioned earlier, about leavers and joiners, you know, is there a wider issue that needs to perhaps be addressed as part of this review to ensure that manual processes are updated and that new employees, I know you've mentioned new employees on page 29, but to me new employees should be new to a role or responsibility, not just new to the service, because side-by-side training isn't often sufficient, and there needs to be sometimes, you know, classroom training first and then backed up. But I think I'm just wondering and worried that there's wider issues just about the way that things operate.
Greg.
Yes, thanks, Councillor McCall. I think hopefully this isn't isolated. I think the campuses are unique within education and children's services. So it is a complex process and procedure, and we will tidy this up, as Jim just said, there for February, because we're all very disappointed in the audit, and we will ensure this is done by February. On the wider issues, I think the rest of the process and procedures within the service are probably more straightforward and controlled, but we're, myself and Jim have obviously been talking through this and obviously looking at how we can ensure through the whole service of education and children's services that things are adequate, and what I'm looking for is probably effective, so that something like this doesn't come to this committee again in the future.
Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Just following up on Mr Boland's point there, he talked about the campuses are unique, and obviously they are unique in some respects, but I was under the impression that the council had looked at moving some of the sports facilities of other schools that are not campuses over to Lau in terms of rates relief. Did that occur? And if it did, is some of the same issues in this potentially in those places?
Greg.
Councillor Murray, yes, you're correct. We have in recent times considered working with Live Act Leisure to gain rates relief as them operating the services, but nothing is transferred. And the rates kind of relief now benefit probably wouldn't come from that process of changing the ownership and running of the facility to Live Active Leisure.
Any further questions? Councillor McCall.
I do have one further question. It's really about systems integration, and has any exploration been done about how the systems could talk more effectively to each other, even if it's just an extract from, you know, from say the council system to Live Active Leisure, or vice versa, you know, on a daily or regular basis that would help reconciliation.
Yep, that is basically the major thing that's going to happen here to make this actually work easier for the staff in the campus, is that with the assistance of Live Active Leisure, we're looking at the reports that come out of MRM, and I think it's called IQ, that is a system that then runs reports that will make the day-end process a lot easier for the actual staff that are trying to do it. So they're going to provide us with the training for the staff and writing bespoke reports for us so that these things can now take place. But it's a lot of the actions are all dependent on these reports being in place. And this is the reports that the Live Active Leisure lose in their own locations, and they work there for them and have been robust there. So they will work in our area as well once we've done the training. It's just that we obviously have the two sets of money going to two different accounts, and we just need to make sure that's tightened up. But these reports will help the staff able to do that a lot easier.
Well, that is very welcome to hear. I'm glad you're doing that. And have you any timescales for those reports to be available? Once the age debt has been agreed and,
yes,
and a reconciliation of that?
They will all be in place by February, but obviously some of the things we're trying to do quicker. There was one where there's a natural, what they call a button being put in place. I don't know if Craig wants to speak to that one.
So what it is if somebody makes a phone call up to the campus, they have to put the card details into a different system to adhere to payment card industry data security standards. But if somebody comes in to make a payment, then it goes into a PDQ machine, which is a different system. So on MRM, we just had card payment. So what we've done is separate it out and put a button for PDQ and a button for pay.net to try and make it easier for the staff to reconcile what payment goes, what route really, and can tie it back.
Thank you. And will there be an escalation process if these reports aren't acted on and reconciled? And how frequent will that be?
Well, what will happen is obviously the business managers are now ultimately responsible. Well, they already are ultimately responsible, but any differences will be getting, I think it's action point 10, 11, that will be emailed to the business managers. So the actual person responsible on site will be them that has to go back to the staff and say, there's a difference here, because essentially we'll identify that there might be a different amount of money in the bank than what they process through the system, but we'd have to address it at the actual campus.
Okay, and therefore if something is aged and not being resolved, will there be an exception report on that to escalate an unresolved issue?
Yeah, we would obviously escalate it within, obviously up to.
Yeah, Councillor McCall, just to give you some hopefully extra assurances about moving forward, is that I meet with business managers once a school term, and this will be a standard item, I think this is referred to in the report, so report will come to there. So I've got the 4 business managers, we're talking through anything that's not been addressed.
Any further questions? There being none, I actually do have a number of points I wanted to ask have been raised already. What I would like to ask is, across the 4 campuses, so we have an indication of the scale of the issue, can I ask what the amounts financially are involved over a full year in terms of revenues? Just a broad indication.
Over the 4 campuses, the LAL income is around about £500,000 approximately, and the council income is around about, we budget for 47,500, and last year it came in at 70,000.
So these are not insignificant amounts, and this really is a pressing issue. Clearly, on the action points of 13, 10 of them are high. I'm grateful for your assurances that this should be largely resolved by February of next year, and I think that's important. But what I do want to ask is on action point 13, where the timelines are set for June 2020 and December 2020. And if you look at that action point, it states, alongside actions noted within this report, a number of areas were identified where it was deemed that controls could be strengthened to provide assurance. I'd like to ask one of the council officers, it might be Scott Walker's not here, Stuart Mackenzie, or maybe one of, maybe Greg. Has this report unearthed, we kind of touched on this earlier, unearthed weaknesses and controls in other parts out with the campuses?
Councillor Donaldson, no, I would say this is the campuses are unique process and procedures within the campus due to the working together between Perth Kinross Council and Live Active Leisure. So it's the only facilities they operate, and we use their system. So it was strictly within the campuses. So,
Jackie?
Just for a degree of clarity, sorry, it is on. For a degree of clarity, this paragraph is referring to an audit report which is yet to come to this committee, and it's in the process of being written at the moment on the collection of cash throughout the council. There are some areas which were observed as part of this review that were pertinent to that audit. So there are some areas there where we've highlighted issues around physical income collection, which, as I say, will come to the next audit committee. But the service has been made aware of those, so as part of their working group, they can take all the actions forward at the same time.
Then, in terms of reporting back, it states February 2020. I note the next audit committee is actually in early February next year, but you're actually hopeful that we can get a full update or a progress report for that meeting.
I think for that meeting, the progress will be the service would hope to say we're almost there and we're about to be training staff.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that they'll be able to bring some form of oral report, if not a fully evidenced follow-up report. That could come later. That could come to the April committee.
Yeah, it just seemed to me early February might just be very tight timeline indeed, but that's helpful to know.
If I may, Stuart, if I can just ask on that point, if Jackie, if you can take note to give a verbal update in February. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, I'll make a note.
Right, we've had quite a wide range of questions. I'm going to ask if there are any observations before I move the report. Councillor McCall.
Thank you very much, Vice Convener. Firstly, thank you very much for the honesty in the report. I think when things go wrong, it's important that we recognise it and we address it, and it's very frank and brutal, the information that's come across, so I appreciate that very much. It's important that we know the position as it stands. It's the only way we can move forward. Having read the report and looked into it, as much as we have spoken here and we've asked questions on systems, on staff changes and staff turnover, staff training, and making sure that we make the process as easy as possible, at the end of the day we need to make sure that when we expect something to be done, it is actually done, and that the supervisory role needs to be made clear that that has to happen, because most of these things wouldn't have fallen down if somebody had been sure that the job that was meant to have been done had been done. So I've listened to everything that's been said and I accept everything that's been said, but something as simple as that could make a massive difference. That's my comment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Yep. Two comments really. Again, repeating what Councillor Drysdale was saying about this demonstrates the importance of internal audit, and to me it's really assuring that we've gone through this process and gone through the pain, but we're actually beginning to see processes put into place, and we can take a lot of assurance from that. So.
Thanks for that. Any other observations? Councillor McCall.
Thank you. It's just really re-emphasising that there seems to be some sort of gap between leavers and joiners processes and people moving from role to role or within facility, and it's not just in this report, but it's in the earlier comment I made before. So I think it's maybe something that needs to be taken on a little bit more robustly, particularly when there's a lot of transformational change. It's very often these manual processes that are overlooked, and there's an assumption that information will just be passed on by word of mouth or by following somebody, shadowing somebody. But if the person being shadowed isn't doing something correctly in the first place, then whoever's been trained in that way will not be taught in the right way. The only other thing I think is quite alarming is that such a significant procedures manual wasn't easily found, wasn't visible, wasn't known, and I'm sure there are other manuals, operational manuals as well. So perhaps the service might want to take that under consideration and make sure that they are aware and that people are aware that these are important. They're not just there to fill space on a shelf and to tick a box.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for all your contributions. I do take the view, I think this is an immensely important internal audit report. I'm glad that we are going to have an oral update in February and then a full update come April. And there are clearly lessons to be learned, but that's the benefit of an audit committee, and we can constantly improve. But this has occurred, it's almost an accretion of issues that have amassed over quite a period of time. But I'm now going to move the report. Does committee accept this report? Right, thank you. We now move on to the other substantive report on today's agenda, and that's on the Early Years and Childcare Strategies team. And this was to establish whether expected controls over the ordering, receipting of and delivering, safeguarding of supplies are in place and are operating satisfactorily within the Early Years and Childcare Strategy teams located at Perth Grammar School's community wing. But it's quite a specific report. It's not a review of the overall position of early years and childcare strategy. It is specifically, as far as I can see, related to stock control and to order processing. Can I ask Jackie, first of all, to give an update?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes. This audit was included within the audit plan as a result of an issue that had been brought to internal audit within the previous financial year. At that point, there was a new service manager who had recently joined that area of the service, and it was a perfect opportunity to actually just look at some of these the controls that were in place and just to tighten them up so that there was clarity in terms of individual staff members as to what the roles were, the responsibilities were, and to ensure that the assets which were held are safeguarded and that there's a streamlined process in place. This was very well received by the service, and as you can see, the actions have been completed in the most part. The service manager is here with us today. Is Ms. Martin Scott. She's here to answer any questions from the service as well. But as you can see, the issues were raised and have been predominantly dealt with already and have been marked as complete within the report.
Could I ask, before asking councillors for questions, would Bernadette Scott like to make some comments?
Yes, thank you, Vice Convener. As Jackie Clark has already said, some of the issues were identified previously, and I had, as a new service manager, went in to manage the service and observed things that I thought potentially needed a greater look at. But we had already started to work on many of the elements of the report, which is why we've managed to action most of that we'd been working with the early years team and the childcare strategy team to bring us more together as a service and to see ourselves as a service and to operate in that way. So that's really why we've been able to action. It's not that we did it very quickly from the report, it's that some of the things had been identified already and moved forward in that respect. We will continue to work on maintaining what we've started. Obviously, some of the processes are quite new, and I also have new systems in place in terms of more regular meetings, with financial control being part of that, across that service rather than two distinct teams, which didn't help over history.
Bernadette, thank you very much for that. I'm now going to hand over to councillors for any questions. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, and it's good to see that you're taking action at the start of taking on the role, and that most of the actions have been done. That's always nice to see when you get to committee. Obviously, some of it's time, but it's good to see regardless. My question is around it's page 12 of the report, or 58 of 60 of our pages, and the actions there are date for completion October 2019 and November 2019. I think it's possibly the only one that's not actually mentioned as complete, but given that we're already midway through November, I'm wondering if you can tell us whether that's been completed.
Yeah. It's part completed. It's a work in progress. The date that we had it to be completed by was the 15th of November, which is actually one of the inset days where it was felt that we could start that process. That is a process that we didn't manage to complete within one day, but we would be confident that that would be completed over the next couple of weeks, and therefore would be able to provide internal audit with the evidence of that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor McCall.
Thank you. I probably should start off, this is maybe a bit unusual to officers, but I have a great deal of sympathy for schools in terms of ordering receipting. It's quite complex, particularly when there's a small number of staff to manage the segregation of duties. It's not to say it shouldn't be done, but it can sometimes be, somewhat challenging. So I am aware of all of that to start with. However, I want a point of clarification. The report mentions Perth Grammar School and play pods at various schools and other premises. Has this report covered all of the schools in Perth and Kinross, or just the grammar and some selected schools?
So for clarity, the play pods are actually something that we have financed. So they have been bought for particular schools with vulnerability. So that the finance has come from the early years and childcare strategy budget, because within the team is Play Start, we have play development workers. So although those resources are cited in play pods at particular schools, that's what that is alluding to. But the containers that are sitting in Perth Grammar car park belong to the childcare strategy team, which works out of the wing at the back. And these things are separate, but they are full of resources for Play Start workers who come on a daily basis to remove things, to go out to communities, to run creches for families. So it's a complex service, but they are two different containers, if you like. I hope that helps.
A little bit. I think the nature of this report is, this seems quite focused, what you've just described to me, whereas when I originally read this report, it seemed to be quite generic across the whole ordering and receipting process and the segregation of duties across the service. So it's a little unclear to me as a substitute here and not a regular attender of this audit committee what this paper is referring to specifically. So that's perhaps something to take on board. I think my main question, I suppose, is around people collecting goods and people receipting them, and what's been done to affect that segregation of duties without making it overly bureaucratic and cumbersome. So it'd be interesting to know how you've managed to achieve that.
I think we were mindful that processes had to change, but equally we needed them to be practical and workable. So we have created a new system where anybody within the team can complete a requisition order, is what we're calling it, which needs to then be signed off by the line manager. Then it is clerical staff who will raise that order in terms of PCOS, and we will not be collecting any goods from particular settings personally. They will be delivered to the wing, and a different member of the clerical staff, because there's a team there, will sign off the goods as they appear. So we've been able to segregate that much more than it had been previously.
If I may just interject there, Councillor McCall, Ms Simpson has just directed me to the appropriate paragraph in the report, which under scope and limitations, which does outline quite clearly the scope of the audit. So, I think it is there. I don't think it's a valid criticism really to say that it's not clear. Yeah.
Any further questions? Councillor McCall again.
I do have a follow-up question. I mean, while the scope is there for the early years strategy team, is there a wider scope then for all of the procurement, receipting and delivery of supplies to schools across the patch?
Procurement covers a very wide area. It's an issue we've looked at in the past, and we will undoubtedly be returning to in the future, and it's such an important issue. Any more questions? Convener, anyone else? Right, I'll just sum up by saying that this was another critical report. It wasn't quite as critical as the first substantive report we had today. But what I think is very pleasing is the manner in which the situation has been turned around so rapidly. And I think from all I can see, all of the action points have been covered. We're up to date on this, and I must say I am pleased about the way it's happened. And just let's hope on the question of the campus income and Lyle that we're going to be in a similar position come February, certainly come April. So I'd like to just move this report. We agreed? Right, and that concludes that paper. Just to close the meeting, I'm going to hand back to the convener. Right.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you very much for chairing much of this meeting. That's hugely appreciated. Just before we do close, I just had one message for members, which is that Audit Scotland and the Improvement Service, you'll have noticed you've had an email from them a week or two ago regarding an upcoming webinar on the 17th of December at 2 p.m. Entitled Safeguarding Public Money. It's of particular relevance, obviously, to this committee, and I would urge you, if at all possible, to tune in to that particular webinar. Unfortunately, Councillor McDade and myself won't be able to because we have IGB at the time, but we'll try and get a recording of that if we can. But if you're able to, that would be helpful. Okay, thanks very much for attending, everyone. Thank you.